My name is Annette Sheldon. I am 64 years old. Last Easter Sunday, in my own dining room, my daughter-in-law poured mimosas for 11 people and ran out of pitcher before she reached my chair. She made a small show of tilting the empty pitcher and shrugging at the table. Then she reached into her canvas tote bag and pulled out a white apron with little blue flowers printed on it and draped it over my shoulders. "You don't mind keeping an eye on the ham, do you, Mom? You're closest to the oven." 11 people watched her do that. My son watched her do that. He put a forkful of fruit salad in his mouth and looked at the eucalyptus centerpiece she had brought from home. Later that afternoon, she stood up with her glass and waited for the room to settle. Tables always go quiet for a woman holding a glass. She said that Gordon would be so proud of how the family had pulled together these past 3 years. She said the estate was all in order now. She said Willa's future was secure. Her mother, who had driven up from Akron that morning, reached across the table and squeezed my daughter-in-law's wrist. What my daughter-in-law did not know, what she would not find out for another 11 weeks, was that I had known about her plan for 6 weeks already, and I had spent every one of those 6 weeks doing what I spent 32 years learning to do when a file came across my desk, and the dates did not line up. Welcome back to Strong Mom Stories. Drop a comment and subscribe, because what I found in my own paperwork is something every woman listening tonight needs to go check for herself before she goes to sleep. Gordon and I bought the house at 1847 Fenwick Road in Gahanna, Ohio, in October of 1991. We paid $112,000 for it. Split level, 3 bedrooms, a backyard big enough that Gordon spent every August out there complaining about the mower and refusing to hire anyone to run it. We put the house into a revocable living trust in 2009. Our attorney, Douglas Keene, drafted it over about 6 weeks and sat across from us at his desk on Morse Road and went through it page by page. The trust held the house, our joint brokerage account, and eventually Gordon's 401 rollover after he retired. The whole point of it, Douglas said when we signed, was simplicity. No probate, no courts, no one picking through our finances on a public docket. And I want you to understand something, he said, looking directly at me. The only person who can change this trust is you, Annette. Nobody else. Not with a power of attorney, not with a letter, not with a notary, and the best intentions in the world. You. That is the entire protection. I understood him completely. I had spent 32 years at First Meridian Bank in Columbus processing trust accounts. I had opened them, amended them, closed them, and written the denial letters when someone submitted paperwork that wasn't adequate. I knew the checklist better than most of the people who had written it, because I had helped write it. I knew what a defective amendment looked like before I finished reading the first paragraph. Gordon died 3 years ago in February. Stroke, at the kitchen table, coffee cup in his hand. He was 66. He had been healthy his entire adult life, and then one Tuesday morning he wasn't anymore, and by Thursday I was on the phone making burial arrangements from the same kitchen where he fell. The trust worked exactly the way Douglas said it would. No probate, no court involvement. His IRA rolled into mine. The brokerage stayed in the trust under my name as sole trustee. The house stayed where it was. I retired 7 months later. 32 years at the same bank was enough, and the building had a way of looking different after you'd gotten a phone call in the parking lot and been told to come home because your husband was on the floor. My daughter-in-law started hosting Easter at my house the following spring. She called and offered to take it off my hands. "Your dining room seats 12, Mom. Ours seats 6. She did not ask to hold it at her house. She asked to hold it at mine. Every year since, she has arrived at 9 in the morning with her own tablecloth, her own serving platters, her own mason jar full of eucalyptus she'd read about in a magazine. Every year I am told, 3 weeks ahead, don't cook anything. Just rest. I stopped arguing about it by the 2nd year. It was easier, and I told myself easy was the same thing as kind. 18 months ago, I had a bad winter. Pneumonia, which at 64 is not the mild inconvenience that younger people imagine. I was in the hospital for 9 days and home on supplemental oxygen for 3 weeks after that. My son drove up from Westerville every other day. My daughter-in-law came twice and was very organized about it. She sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and made a list of things that needed managing, bills to watch, medications to refill, a follow-up appointment to schedule. She also had a document she had printed from the State Bar website, a durable power of attorney form, Ohio Standard Version, fillable PDF. Just a precaution, she said. In case you can't get to the bank for a while, Colton can take care of things. You don't want your automatic payments to bounce. She was not wrong about the payments. I signed it. I dated it. I did not write the time beside my signature, which is a habit I had kept without exception for 32 years at the bank, and which I broke that afternoon because I was on supplemental oxygen and tired, and she was standing right there with the pen, and the light was poor. I have thought about that signature a great deal since February. 18 months is a long time to sit on a piece of paper. My daughter-in-law did not use it immediately. She used it in February of this year when she submitted a co-trustee change request to First Meridian's trust department. She attached the power of attorney. She asked that she and my son be added as co-trustees of the Sheldon Family Revocable Trust, with equal authority to act on all trust assets. The trust department mailed me a notice of trustee change request the same week. It is a standard one-page letter, generated automatically by the system whenever a change application is filed on a grantor-managed trust. I had mailed hundreds of them in my time. I knew what it was before I finished reading the first sentence. I sat at the kitchen table and read it twice, slowly, the way I used to read a file when something was wrong, but I couldn't yet put a name to it. Then I got a yellow legal pad from the drawer and wrote 3 things down. Then I picked up the phone and called Clarice. Clarice worked in trust operations at First Meridian for 27 years. She retired the same month I did. We go to the same church and we have had coffee at the same diner on the second Wednesday of every month since October 2022. I told her what the letter said. She went quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Did they include grantor amendment authorization language in the POA?" I said, "I didn't think so." She said, "Then it doesn't work." I said, "I know." She said, "Go to the bank." Let me explain why it doesn't work, because it matters and because it is simpler than it sounds. A revocable living trust is controlled by its grantor, the person who created it. The grantor can change it, amend it, revoke it, add people to it, remove people from it. But that power belongs to the grantor personally. It is not something that can be handed off. Under Ohio law, a durable power of attorney, even a broad general one, cannot be used to amend a revocable trust unless the trust document itself specifically authorizes that delegation. Our trust document, the one Douglas Keene typed up in 2009, did not authorize it. It said the opposite. In the paragraph, Douglas had read aloud to me at the signing table, and that I had never forgotten because it was the sentence that made the whole thing worth doing. What my daughter-in-law had filed was a co-trustee amendment request, signed by my son under a power of attorney that gave him no authority to sign it. The POA was valid. It was simply invalid for this particular purpose, for the same reason that having a spare key to someone's house does not mean you can list it as collateral. I went to the bank 2 days after Easter. Arlene, who had taken over my old position when I retired, walked me through the submitted file. I read every page. The power of attorney was the standard Ohio general form. It contained no specific trust amendment language, no reference to the Sheldon Family Revocable Trust by name, no notarized grantor authorization. On page 3 of the co-trustee request form, there was a signature line that read, "Grantor signature required." It was blank. My daughter-in-law had left it blank, the paperwork, and submitted the paperwork anyway, because she did not know what that line meant, and no one at the bank had called her to explain it before processing went forward. I had reviewed files with that exact defect approximately 400 times over 32 years. Every single one of them had been returned with a denial letter. I sat in the chair across from Arlene, the same chair I had faced from the other side of the desk for 3 decades, and I did 4 things. I formally revoked the general power of attorney I had signed during the pneumonia. I executed a new limited one naming only Douglas Keene, with explicit language that it could not be used to amend the trust under any circumstances. I filed a standing instruction with the trust department. No changes to the trust without my original notarized signature on the bank's own amendment form, and a confirmation call to Douglas's office first. Then I asked for a complete copy of the third-party contact log on the Sheldon Family Revocable Trust going back 3 years. Arlene printed it while I sat there. 4 entries. The first was 18 months ago. My son had called to ask, in general terms, whether a power of attorney could authorize a trustee change. The person who took that call told him it depended on the document. The second was 13 months ago. A call from a number I did not recognize, asking whether trust assets could be liquidated by a co-trustee acting independently. They were told the grantor would need to be involved. The third was 7 months ago. An email from an address I recognized as my daughter-in-law's work account, asking about the process for updating beneficiary designations on accounts held inside a trust. The fourth was the co-trustee change request, filed in February, 2 months before she draped an apron over my shoulders at Easter dinner. I read those 4 lines 3 times. Then I thanked Arlene and drove home. My daughter-in-law called me 14 times between Easter and the middle of June. I answered 3 of them. In each conversation, she was pleasant, and she asked how I was, and she mentioned in passing that the paperwork was still being processed. I said I was fine. I said I was sure things would sort themselves out. I did not tell her what I had done at the bank, because as a person who thinks you are unaware will keep talking, and she was telling me a great deal about herself with every call. The confrontation happened on a Saturday in late May. My son came alone. He sat at the kitchen table with both hands around a coffee cup and told me the bank had sent a letter about a problem with the filing. He said he had thought everything was in order. He looked at the table when he said it, not at me. I asked him when he had first spoken to the bank about the trust. He was quiet for a while. He said Reese had handled most of it. I said, "Your father and I built that trust in 2009 so there would be nothing to fight over and nothing to wait on after he was gone. That is still what it is." He said, "The landscaping business needs capital this year. There are 2 commercial contracts we could take on if we had the right equipment." Reese thought. He paused. She said the trust was just sitting there. I said, "The trust is not sitting there. It is the house I sleep in, and the account that covers my prescriptions and the foundation your father spent 40 years building. So I would be all right after he was gone. It was never sitting. It was working, the way he intended it to work." He did not have anything to say to that. Then I went to the drawer by the stove, and I took out the white apron with the blue flowers. I folded it into a square and set it on the table between us. "Take this home," I said. "The next time you have a question about the trust, put it in writing and send it to Douglas." It was the only sharp thing I said all morning. I want to be honest about why I kept it to one. My son is not a cruel man. He married a woman who is very good at making a plan sound like obvious, good sense. And he has been trusting her plan since the year Willow was a toddler and the business nearly went under the first time. He looked at the apron, and then he looked at me, and I could see him trying to decide what to apologize for and not being able to land anywhere solid. He left at noon. I heard his truck back out of the driveway, and then the street went quiet. On the first Monday in June, I drove to Douglas Keene's office on Morse Road. Same office, same parking lot, same rubber tree in the corner that had been there since 1994. I sat across from Douglas and told him everything in order, because Douglas charges by the hour and he deserves organized clients. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he took his glasses off, cleaned them, and said, "They can't touch it, Annette. Not without your signature. Not now, not with any instrument that currently exists." I said, "I know, I need you to say it in the document, so there is no room for a second attempt." He said, "Give me a week." The trust amendment was signed and notarized on the 9th of June. Douglas added 4 sentences to paragraph 7 of the original. The grantor's power to amend or revoke this trust is personal and non-delegable. No agent, attorney in fact, co-trustee, beneficiary, or third party may exercise this power on behalf of the grantor, regardless of the breadth of any power of attorney or other instrument, unless a court of competent jurisdictions specifically authorizes such action in a proceeding to which the grantor is a named party. Any purported amendment not bearing the grantor's original notarized signature on a form approved by the trustee institution shall be void ab initio. This provision may not itself be amended, except by the grantor appearing in person. He charged me $640. I wrote the check from my own account and kept the receipt in the accordion file behind the original trust document. The bank's formal denial letter arrived at my son's address on a Wednesday in late June. Co-trustee change request denied. Submitted instrument insufficient to authorize amendment of grantor-managed trust. Grantor authorization required. The request could be resubmitted with proper documentation, which meant it could be resubmitted with my signature, which meant it could not be resubmitted at all unless I decided to resubmit it myself. My daughter-in-law called me that evening. I let it go to voicemail. She called the next morning. I let that one go too. The third call, 2 days later, I picked up. She was very calm. She said there had been a misunderstanding. She said she had only been trying to help the family. She said, Douglas Keene had always been difficult. I said, I appreciate you thinking of everyone. Anything concerning the trust goes to Douglas in writing from now on. She said she understood. Her brother, who had apparently been working with a financial broker on some kind of arrangement and who stood to collect a referral fee if the co-trustee change cleared, did not collect anything. I found this out the way you find out most things in a suburban community. Through someone who used to work at the bank and still knows who is moving money around and why. He had invested his own time and some of his own money into a plan that fell apart because of one word in paragraph 3 of a trust document he had never read. The word was personal. Gordon's attorney had put it there at my suggestion in the fall of 2009 because I had watched what happened to trusts that didn't have it. My son returned the equipment deposit he'd put down in April. He finished the landscaping season with what he already had. He is a good operator. 16 years in business, client retention that most companies would envy. And none of that was ever the problem. The problem was a promise made on money that was never available to promise, and that problem is his to resolve now, on his own terms, without a shortcut that was never real. Her mother drove back to Akron in July. I don't know what she was told. I don't know what any of them were told, because no one called to explain it and I did not ask. Willa came to see me on a Saturday in August, on her own, without mentioning it to either of her parents. She is 14 years old. She took 2 buses and walked the last 6 blocks to my back door and knocked at 11 in the morning. I made her a grilled cheese and we sat at the table, and she asked me how I had known something was wrong before Easter. I told her about the notice letter. I told her about the contact log and the 4 entries and what 18 months of phone calls and emails to a bank adds up to. She said, "Did you already know when she put the apron on you?" I said, "I knew something." She was quiet for a while, working through her sandwich. Then she said, "I'm sorry about that, Grandma." I told her it was not hers to apologize for, and I meant it completely, because she had sat at that table on Easter Sunday and not laughed and not looked away. And when the room went quiet after the estate announcement, she had reached over under the table and put her hand on top of mine and left it there until her mother started talking again. That is a remarkable kid. I am not always sure where she came from. In September, I wrote my son a letter. Regular mail, 1 stamp, no return receipt, because I did not need proof of delivery. I needed him to read it without feeling like evidence. The first paragraph said I understood the business was in a hard place, and that I knew he had been scared, and that being scared does not make a person dishonest. I meant every word of that. The second paragraph said that his father and I had built the trust for one reason, not for the family to draw from, not to fund an expansion that might or might not work out, so that I would be all right after Gordon was gone. Gordon had been very clear about that when we signed in 2009, and he had been right to be clear, because here we are, and I am all right, and that is exactly what he was paying for. The third paragraph was 4 sentences. The trust would remain as it is. Douglas Keene's number is in the family binder on the 3rd shelf in the hallway. My back door is open to him and to Willa any day of the week with nothing required in exchange. No conditions attached. He sent me a text 2 weeks later, 4 words, "I'm sorry, Mom, okay." That is where things stand. I will not call it healed, because healed suggests an ending, and I am not sure this has one yet. What I know is that on the 1st of every month the accounts are where they belong, and the house on Fenwick Road still has my name on the deed and Gordon's name in the trust caption. And the trust document now says in plain language what Douglas told us it meant back in 2009. The apron is still in my kitchen. It hangs on the hook beside the stove. I put it on every Sunday when Willa takes the bus over, because she asked me to teach her how Gordon used to make the pot roast, and I found out I remembered every step without having to look anything up. I am not sentimental about very much, but I am sentimental about the fact that a white apron with blue flowers, which was placed on me in my own dining room to show me what I was in that house, now covers the front of me every time I cook something worth sitting down for. If you have a trust, a will, a bank account, or a power of attorney with someone else's name on it that you did not put there yourself, go find out today. Not this weekend. Today. Call your bank and ask for the contact log on your account. Call your attorney and ask when you last reviewed your documents. Read your own paperwork before someone who means to use it does. If you find a name you didn't expect, drop it in the comments. I want to hear about it. And subscribe! Because the woman who first taught me to read a document all the way to the last line is coming up next, and what she found in her own file, after 40 years, makes everything I've told you tonight look straightforward.